Hogan wasn't exactly known for losing, so when he did, it was always a big deal. And on occasion, it was nothing short of shocking. These losses in particular left fans reeling. Hogan's first WWF Championship run, which started when he defeated the Iron Sheik for the title in 1984, sparked a boom period for the promotion and lasted more than 4 years. It finally came to a shocking end in front of a record 33 million television viewers on NBC, and in controversial fashion. Almost a year after the slam heard around the world at WrestleMania 3, Andre the Giant finally defeated Hogan, but only thanks to a diabolical scheme devised by the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. DiBiase bribed referee Earl Hebner to count the pin on Hogan despite the champion's shoulders not being down. Andre then handed the title over to DiBiase, declaring him champion. Commissioner Jack Tunney stripped DiBiase of the title, leaving it vacant. This set the stage for Macho Man Randy Savage to win the championship in a tournament at WrestleMania 4 the following month, defeating DiBiase in the final with an assist from Hogan. Hogan needed to drop the title to take on his first starring role in a feature, No Holds Barred, 6 years after his film debut as Thunderlips in Rocky III.
Thunderlips is here, in the flesh, baby.
The WWF's biggest star was a shoo-in to win the first ever Royal Rumble match to be broadcast on pay-per-view. Or at least that was what fans assumed. Hogan eliminated 10 men, but the bigger focus was the beginning of his feud with his Mega Powers partner, Randy Savage, that would come to a head at WrestleMania 5. The Hulkster was only in the ring for 11 minutes and 31 seconds. He was dominant over that time, but in the process of throwing out Bad News Brown, Hogan inadvertently eliminated Savage, sowing dissent between the two allies. Hogan was later eliminated by Akeem and the Big Boss Man, and 50-year-old Big John Studd wound up the last man standing. The Mega Powers finally fully exploded a few weeks later on the main event, with an incensed Savage assaulting Hogan backstage in a jealous fit of rage over Miss Elizabeth. The Undertaker made his debut in the WWF at 1990's Survivor Series as the $1 Million Man's mystery teammate. He made a huge splash over the next year, setting the stage for a title clash with Hogan at the following year's Survivor Series. The match was promoted as The Gravest Challenge. The Undertaker had help, of course. 2 months after his stunning WWF debut, Ric Flair was pivotal in Hogan's loss. Flair introduced a steel chair into the match, and The Undertaker used it to deliver a particularly devastating tombstone pile driver for the victory. Taker then lost the title back to Hogan only 6 days later at the This Tuesday in Texas event.
I didn't find out till Tuesday. I knew there was going to be another pay-per-view, but I didn't know that I was going to drop the belt back.
Flair attempted to intervene once again, but this time it backfired. Hogan also got in hot water for some shenanigans, though. Commissioner Jack Tunney saw Hogan throwing the ashes from Undertaker's urn into his eyes before his win, so Tunney once again vacated the title, putting it up for grabs in the 1992 Royal Rumble match. The 1992 Royal Rumble match was a truly star-studded event, but up against a who's who of wrestling's present and future, Hogan entered this Rumble as once again the odds-on favorite to win. After all, he had won in both 1990 and 1991, but this time it wasn't about the Hulkster. Instead, Flair won his Royal Rumble debut while delivering one of the most well-regarded individual performances in company history. Hogan, meanwhile, was thrown out by Sid Justice. In the end, Flair eliminated Justice to win the vacated WWF Championship. It marked the first time ever that the title changed hands in the Royal Rumble match. Hogan clashed with Justice a couple of months later in what is generally regarded as one of the worst WrestleMania main events of all time, while Flair lost the title to Savage in a fondly remembered classic. By 1993, Hogan was on his way out of the WWF, and his final title reign before leaving for WCW isn't well regarded. It began in convoluted fashion at WrestleMania 9. Despite not being scheduled in the main event, Hogan appeared after Bret the Hitman Hart's title loss to Yokozuna. Yoko's manager, Mr. Fuji, challenged the Hulkster on behalf of the newly crowned champion to an impromptu championship match, and the show ended with Hogan holding the title high. Hart recounted what Hogan said after the match at a StarCast event.
I just want you to know I'd be happy to return the favor anytime. And that guy was the biggest liar in the wrestling business.
Even so, for the first time, Hogan was little more than a placeholder champion. Hogan and Yokozuna faced off again 2 months later at the inaugural King of the Ring pay-per-view, and there were plenty more shenanigans. Hogan lost the championship, but only after being hit with a horrible-looking fireball thrown by a photographer Mr. Fuji planted at ringside. The fireball gave Yokozuna the opportunity to beat Hogan with a leg drop, of all things, the very move Hogan had made famous for the previous decade. Following the match, Yokozuna laid Hogan out with a devastating bonsai drop. Hogan even had to be helped away from the ringside area by officials afterward, his hands covering his eyes. The match was Hogan's final televised appearance for the company that would become WWE for nearly 9 years. Arn Anderson may be one of the most skilled technicians ever seen in wrestling, but even his biggest fans would probably admit they never thought they'd see the Enforcer beat Hulk Hogan, including Arn himself. He said on his podcast,
"It was big to me because I saw the evolution of Hulk Hogan. I lived it. I lived through it. I saw it. And I saw what he meant."
In the early months of his WCW run, the Hulkster was embroiled in seemingly never-ending feuds with the Dungeon of Doom and a watered-down version of the Four Horsemen, which included Anderson and Ric Flair. While Anderson's February 1996 Nitro match with Hogan was officially a one-on-one bout, it played out more like a handicap match, given that Hogan had to not only contend with Anderson, but also Flair and Horseman valets Miss Elizabeth and Woman at ringside. It took powder being thrown in Hogan's eyes and a high heel to the face to get there, but the result was a stunning Anderson victory over Hogan. Anderson beat Hogan for a second straight time on Nitro the following week, though this time via disqualification due to interference from Savage. This was all part of a program that led to one of the more overwrought pay-per-view main events in WCW history at the 1996 Uncensored pay-per-view. Hogan and Savage defeated a team of Flair, Anderson, Lex Luger, and several others in a bizarre Doomsday cage match.
What is that? Somebody's belt.
Arguably, Hogan's biggest WWF rival, Roddy Piper, made his return at WCW Halloween Havoc 1996. What followed was a convoluted build to what would ultimately be a non-title match between the two at that year's Starrcade, so it probably should have been obvious something was up. Both men were shadows of the performers who set the wrestling world on fire when they main evented the first ever WrestleMania 11 years earlier, but the crowd in Nashville was still red hot to see this match. At the time, Hogan felt seemingly invincible with the NWO behind him. He had become champion at the Hog Wild pay-per-view by defeating the Giant, who had since joined the Black and White as well. But Piper seemed to have Hogan's number. The crowd erupted with joy when Hogan succumbed to a sleeper hold, some seemingly thinking Piper had claimed the title. He hadn't. Jacques Rougeau accomplished a lot in his career. He was a former WWF Intercontinental Champion and held the Tag Team Championships as half of the Quebecers, but he never got close to the main event in the WWF or WCW, so it was quite a shock for him to deliver Hogan his first clean loss since his WrestleMania 6 match against the Ultimate Warrior. It all happened at a non-televised live event. The whole thing makes more sense when you discover that Rougeau organized the show himself. He told Hannibal TV that he put up $225,000 of his own money to run Montreal's Molson Center because WCW did not tour in Canada at the time. The Quebec native was stunned to enter the locker room and hear Hogan ask him what he wanted to do for the match, assuming it was a good-natured joke. But it wasn't. Hogan did the honors cleanly, getting rolled up for the 3 count with a small package.
The only reason why I beat you is because you let me. Hey. But thank you very much.
Hogan's match with Sting at Starrcade 1997 was one of the most highly anticipated bouts in WCW history, with more than a year of build-up. That match's controversial finish disappointed or angered a lot of fans, and by the time the two faced off again in 1999, the bloom had come off the rose. They met at that year's Halloween Havoc, the first WCW pay-per-view helmed by Vince Russo, the former WWF head writer, who had been given a lot of credit for the ascendance of Monday Night Raw in the TV ratings. But Russo's WCW run was far less successful. Hogan's 1999 match with Sting is a perfect example of Russo's approach. At the match's outset, Hogan appeared to whisper something in Sting's ear before laying down for the 3 count. It was his last TV appearance for 4 months. While this was presumably intended to be part of a reality-based story designed to present Hogan as legitimately walking out on the company, in actuality, it just left fans once again confused and upset. Hogan spent much of the year 2000, WCW's final full year of operation, feuding with the New Blood, a group of young wrestlers who believed they had been overlooked by the company. Hogan had aligned himself with the Millionaires Club, the old guard of WCW main eventers that also included Ric Flair, Kevin Nash, and Sting. Mike Awesome, a former ECW champion who had recently arrived in the company, was one of the New Blood members, and fittingly, his May Nitro bout against Hogan played out like a poor imitation of an ECW match. It mostly consisted of brawling around the ring and chair shots. One of those chair shots came courtesy of Billy Kidman, also part of the New Blood. Kidman flew off the top rope to the outside to strike Hogan in the head, allowing Awesome to pick up a fairly stunning pinfall victory. Kidman, who was positioned as a new rival for Hogan, got the better of the veteran on TV several more times, but as usual, the Hulkster came out on top when the stakes were highest. He beat Kidman on back-to-back pay-per-views at Slamboree and the Great American Bash. Like Awesome, Vampiro was also part of the New Blood, and for the second time in 3 weeks, Billy Kidman cost Hogan a surprising loss on Nitro. This time, Vampiro pinned the Hulkster after Kidman smashed Hogan with a blowtorch, which had become a big part of Vampiro's act at the time. Fortunately for Hogan, Sting hit the scene after the match to save him from potential further damage. Vampiro remains perhaps the most surprising name on the short list of wrestlers undefeated against Hogan. The two never wrestled again, and unlike many other wrestlers who worked with Hogan, Vampiro had nothing but good things to say about his experience in the match. He told Chris Van Vliet,
"If it wasn't for Hulk Hogan, none of us would have a job."
While others made Hogan pass out in submission holds, only one wrestler ever made Hogan actually tap out, according to our research, Kurt Angle. Returning to WWE in February 2002, Hogan turned back the clock with a nostalgia-filled run that was much better than it had any right to be. He stole the show with The Rock at WrestleMania 18, and the Hulkster was the WWE champion by April of that year. That final WWE title reign lasted only a month, and he soon found himself in a brief, underappreciated rivalry with Angle. Angle had his head shaved at Judgment Day after losing a hair versus hair match against Edge. Angle hilariously wore a wig under headgear that the Hulkster removed in his match with the Olympic gold medalist at King of the Ring 2002. Enraged by his bald head being exposed, Angle tried to use a steel chair, only to have it ricochet against the ropes and back into his own face. He would walk away with the last laugh, however, countering Hogan's patented leg drop into the ankle lock, forcing the Immortal to tap out for the only time we can find.
Party's over, Grandpa.
Brock Lesnar was an instant star in WWE, so Hogan putting Lesnar over in the twilight of his career was a no-brainer. But the way Hogan's loss to Lesnar transpired was unlike anything fans had seen before. Lesnar won the 2002 King of the Ring tournament to guarantee himself a WWE Championship opportunity at SummerSlam, but on an August episode of SmackDown, the Hulkster coaxed Lesnar into putting that shot on the line. Even with Lesnar rapidly ascending the card, shenanigans were still needed to take down Hogan. Paul Heyman prevented Hogan's attempt at a second leg drop, allowing Lesnar to hit an F5. Lesnar then squeezed the life out of Hogan with a bear hug for a technical stoppage as Hogan bled from the mouth. Lesnar attacked Hogan with a chair afterward, smearing the Hulkster's blood across his own chest. Hogan had rarely been brutalized to this extent. Lesnar toppled The Rock a few weeks later at SummerSlam, becoming the youngest WWE champion in history at just 25.